So for you, television was not a curiosity for very long.
No, television was a one-act play that I'd done so many of. And now we act in this play, and there happens to be some cameras over there. But then I even began to feel that cameras were an audience. In those years, the cameras...
Let me stop you there, and we'll continue.
The camera was very large, had a lot of hot tubes in it, and they had a fan in it. And the fan was as low noise, as minimal noise as possible. So it made a little whirring sound as it cooled the innards of the camera. For all that you might know, it was breathing. And there was this warm camera. And there was somebody behind it, but he was kind of hidden behind this massive thing. So the thing kind of moved. In fact, one time, I saw two cameras on dollies, electrical dollies, from one end of the... Somehow they got loose, and they came at each other. Two cameras on electrical dollies, like two prehistoric animals. Boom! And they hit each other, and they fell over like two prehistoric amphibians. So I thought of the camera as alive. It was like if you stood beside it to make an entrance, the thing kind of purred at you. If you were going to come on camera during a live television show, you might make an entrance beside the camera. Cue comes on, you come past the camera. So while you're standing by the camera, the thing is going... And it never frightened me. I always loved that camera. I loved the little camera. And you could pet it. You could savor it. Then its eye went on. Little red eye.
One thing I noticed, reviewing some of your early television, is that directors seem to be aware of that sensibility on your behalf, because there's a tremendous amount of footage where you either walk into an extreme close-up or the camera pushes in on an extreme close-up. Are you aware of that?
Well, you're aware and not aware. If you're aware, then you shouldn't be aware. It's a very Zen thing. Like an actor has to be aware of the audience, but he can't be aware of the audience. You know, you have to know if you're in a comedy, it's funny, but you can't be funny. It's a kind of mystical position.
Were you ever told by a director that you specifically had a face and a technique that catered to that particular use of the camera?
No, but I was not unaware. You know, you had to hit marks. You had to be saying something in the extreme naturalness of a close-up and walk 10 yards and stand on a mark with your toes on the mark, because the focus was preset. The focus puller was the cameraman, and he knew where you were going to be, and if you weren't there, you were out of focus. And if you were out of focus, then you couldn't cut and say, all right, let's try it again, and this time, and somebody else on the camera saying, oh, he's short of his mark by 6 inches, and adjust the focus. There was none of that.
But even for professional actors, that kind of proximity can be very intimidating.
Intimidating, yeah.
For you, it wasn't?
No, it was not.
Something you embraced?
Yes. It felt warm and cozy.
Interesting. In 1956, you had your first major television role in a Goodyear theater production, All Summer Long by Robert Anderson. Tell us about that. Memories of that particular...
I had come off of a play by Marlowe in Tamburlaine, I believe, and I played a part called, I think it was an amalgamation of several parts that Guthrie had done, and his name was Uzum Kasani, and I remember the name, and I remember very little about anything anywhere. But Uzum Kasani was the name in Marlowe's play. And Daniel Petrie he became a famous film director, but at that time he was a director in live television. And he cast me in a play that had been on Broadway that now was making its debut on television, in, I guess, a leading part or a major part. I think that was the play in which they said introducing. I think so. And ever since then, every time I saw Daniel, including today, he says, Uzum Kasane. This funny bond we have that goes back all those years. So that play and that part introduced me to the American television audience. And once you get that kind of debut, then doors open. And that's what happened.
Tell me about working with some of the people in the golden age of television, such as Fred Coe, Raymond Massey.
Well, Fred Coe was a great producer, and I saw very little of him. He was upstairs, and I was downstairs. And then when I did see him, he was surrounded by network and advertising people. They walked as a group. Now, I'm sure he walked singly when he didn't come into my presence, but when I saw him, they marched as a large group of people making unified decisions. Raymond Massey, tall, angular Canadian actor who had become famous in America, I performed with, and I always remember watching his mouth because he had these big, loose lips, and there was something very sensual about his big, loose lips. His son is around somewhere.
You'd moved to the United States. Was there any problem with Canadian citizenship, getting an agent, anything like that?
No, because we had come down, the Canadian company had come down to the United States to play at the Winter Gardens, this big play by Marlowe, Tamburlaine. And that was my intro to New York and New York theater people and New York television, and all television was in New York. So the hierarchy of people who hire you, that's an interesting word, the hierarchy, and the people who could write things for, or who were writing things and wanted you, the people who could employ you were all in New York. And I had been successful in a New York play. And I went back to Canada with the company, but when I came back down to the United States, I'd gotten my green card, which was not difficult to do in those days, and I had an agent based on the play, and I had this role.
You also appeared in 2 omnibus teleplays. Do you remember those?
What were the names?
Karen? We'll come
Don't
back
know.
to those.